Okay, so the last chapter for this module, special senses. So it's a combination with the nervous system. All right, I've got nose, tongue, eyes, ears. So we're all familiar with what they detect. So smell, taste, sight. What does the ears detect? Sound. What else? What else does the ear detect? Anybody had an ear infection?
Yeah.
How'd you feel? Pain? Did you get dizzy at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. So also um, equilibrium is in your ears. So not just sound, but equilibrium. So these have specific organs, whereas touch is generalized. You have different types of receptors embedded in your skin. But the skin does more than just touch. So everything is transferred to the brain. So if it's a signal going to the brain, is it afferent or efferent? Afferent. So your senses, they send an electrical signal to the brain, and the brain will need to respond. So it'll send an efferent signal. All right, so we'll start with smell. So olfactory is for smelling. So that term olfact is smelling. So at the roof of your nose, you have these holes, right, in your skull. So it's a fenestrated plate. So you have these nerve bulbs that actually extend through your skull, and they reach down the upper levels of your nose. And that's where they detect. And what they're detecting are chemicals. So these guys are chemoreceptors. They detect chemicals. So if it's a smell, these guys are picking it up. They're sending a signal to the brain, and it interprets it as food, butter, honey, right? Or bananas, whatever smell or chemical it detects. So this word cubiform, that just means has a bunch of holes in it. That way the nerves can dangle. So in your nasal cavity, um, it's moist. So in order to transfer to these receptors, the air, the chemical needs to be moistened in that mucus. So here they just put it in a diagram. The smell receptors will detect a chemical, sends a signal from the bulb, right? It goes through the brain through the skull up to the brain. So it's in the cerebrum. So the front part of your brain interprets the smell. Uh, have you ever heard of being nose blind? What does that mean to be nose blind? You can't smell? Hmm. So have you ever been into somebody's room where it smells like old dirty socks, but they've been in there all day so they don't smell it anymore? Yeah. So that's what they mean by sensory adaptation. So since you smell it, if you keep on smelling it all day, then your brain will be occupied. So it just gets nose blind to it. Gustatory. So the term gustatory is taste. So the taste buds aren't actually the little bumps on your tongue, right? Those are the papules on your tongue. So the actual taste buds are actually in between, and they're down in the cracks. Much like smelling, the chemical needs to mix with the saliva in the mouth, like it does with the mucus in the nose. So the actual bumps are just papillae. So you have different types. There's like ones that look like mushrooms, other ones they look like they cover your tongue like a forest. So they give them different names. So even the ones in the back of your tongue, the big ones, those are just papules. They're supposed to be there. The taste bud will go to the image are actually in between the papules. And the saliva mixed with the chemical has to dig deep down inside in order to be detected by the taste bud. And that sends a signal to the brain as well. So in between the bumps, you need that fluid mixed with the chemicals to actually access the taste bud. So we have multiple taste sensations. Sweet. Give me an example of something sweet. What's that? Candy, okay. Sour? Lemon. How about salty? Salt. All right. Bitter? Medicine. Yeah, some medicine. So what's the other taste? There is another one. So it is umami. So you guys ever heard of that? Savory. All right. So things like ketchup, soy sauce, that type of flavor, that salty, beefy flavor, that's umami. So that activates glutamate. What is MSG? What's MSG? Is it good or bad? What have you heard of it? Have you guys ever heard of it? No? Go to a Chinese restaurant, it says no MSG added. Right? So MSG is monosodium glutamate. You guys know what accent is? The flavoring, right? Have you guys ever had salt and pepper chicken wings from a Chinese restaurant? That white crystal stuff they put on it, right? That's MSG. So that is a neurotransmitter. So you put it on food, it tricks your brain into thinking, ooh, this tastes good. So it triggers that umami flavor. Ketchup, soy sauce, barbecue. Spicy, is that a flavor? Is that a flavor? It's not a flavor. It's activating your pain receptors. So what does spicy taste like? Hot. See, so a jalapeno tastes like a jalapeno, but the burn is the pain receptors. So similar to smell, the taste buds, they activate and they send a signal. So even though certain regions of your mouth have concentrated receptors for sweet or sour, you have all different types of receptors everywhere in your mouth. It's just they're more concentrated in certain areas. So the gustatory cortex, so on the surface of the cerebrum, is where it's interpreted. Vision in the eyes. So the eyes are so important that over 70% of all of your sensory data are from the eyes. And where it's interpreted in the occipital lobe, that's where your brain is doing the fastest amount of calculations. Because when you see, you're getting millions and millions of pieces of data into your eyes, and your brain has to learn how to see. So babies, when they first see, they don't really see anything. The brain has to learn what it sees. So they only see dark and light, and then they start to see color, and then they start to see focus. So if you get a person that was blind from birth, and you fix their eyes, they wouldn't be able to see because the brain doesn't know what it's seeing. So you have to learn to see. But if you lost your vision, and then later on in life it's restored, then your brain already knows how to see. The optic nerve. You guys ever heard of glaucoma? So in the case of glaucoma, you have a nerve in the back of your eye. It goes through a little tunnel, And if you have glaucoma, that little tunnel gets pinched off and it can damage the nerve. So that's also where you have a little blind spot in your vision, where the optic nerve goes through the retina. So the vision process is kind of crossed. So what you see partially in your left eye is processed on the right side of your brain, and what you see on the right side, or the right eye, is processed on the left side of the brain. 3 layers, 2 chambers. So anterior chamber, is that the front or back? Anterior chamber. And then the posterior chamber is the one in the back. The anterior chamber is watery. The posterior chamber is thicker. It has jelly in it. Outer layer, the whites of the eye. So that's the sclera, and it's opaque, so light cannot pass through. Also, this is where the muscles of the eyes attach to the eyeball, the outer layer, that hard white sclera. Where it connects with the cornea, so you have 2 lenses that light will refract through. So the first one's the cornea, the second one's the lens. So you have 2 areas where light will bend. So the cornea is the first part. So where the whites of the eye and the cornea meet all the way around, that's called the limbus. Cataracts. What are cataracts? So cataracts, you go blind from it. That's when the cornea gets dark, gets opaque. You guys ever seen headlights on a car? Old car? The plastic gets kind of dark. Kind of the same thing. The cornea is made out of keratin. Where do we find keratin? The same protein in your hair, nails, but the way it's put together, it's clear. But if you're not, if you're old or you don't have good nutrition, then that protein can then get cloudy and cause blindness. So they can just transplant it, cut it, remove it, put in a donor or an artificial one. The middle layer, corcoid. So for us, our middle layer is black, so it's going to absorb light. For some animals, you've probably done this. If you shine a light in their eyes, it glows. It kind of reflects back at them, back at you, like a cat's eye. If you ever see it with a light shining on it, that's because their corcoid layer is actually reflective, because they're night animals, they're nocturnal. So that light gets to be bounced around in their eye and they have better night vision. The iris. So that gives you the color. What's the hole called? What's the hole in the middle of the iris called? That's the pupil. So we have 2 types of muscles. We have round muscles and we have straight muscles. So when the straight muscles get smaller, right, they open up the eyes. When the round muscles get smaller, they close the pupil. The middle layer. Ciliary body is made out of 2 things. It's made out of 1, the muscles, the ciliary muscles, and 2, the ligaments. Right? So when you are focusing, you're changing the shape of the lens. Right? So you're physically changing the lens with these muscles and ligaments. But just like nails, when they get old, they tend to get brittle. So when you age, it's hard for you to focus because you can't flex the lens anymore. You can no longer accommodate accurately. So we'll go through the terms for all these eye conditions. So the process of focusing is called accommodation. So that's flexing, making the lens change shape. The retina. This is the projector screen. So in order for us to see the image on the projector, it needs to be focused. So the depth of field is on the projector screen. So if it's focused too far in front or too far behind the retina, then you'll get a blurry vision. So that's what happens when you're nearsighted or farsighted. The projector is not projecting on the projector screen, aka your retina. Cones and rods. So the way you remember is C is for color. So rods, think of a lightning rod. Right? So that's your mnemonic device. Cones detect color. So your mnemonic device is alliteration. So for vision, color vision, your best color vision is in the center of vision. So in the center you see the best color. But on the outside, the edges of your vision, your peripheral vision, you'll have more rods. So the best night vision is actually to look at the sides. You'll see better vision at night because more rods are in your peripheral. You guys heard of color blindness? Right? So red, orange, yellow, blue. So we have 3 cones, and some people, one of their color producing pigments or absorbing pigments are broken, so they can't see certain colors. Right, anterior chamber. Is it the front or back? The front. So this has a very watery filling. So it's the aqueous humor. Humor just means liquid. It's an old way of saying kind of liquidy. So aqueous humor, liquid, it's in the front. Anterior chamber, A is for aqueous. So that's your mnemonic device, more alliteration. In the posterior chamber, you're going to get the jelly in the eyes. So this is going to be a lot thicker. So the word for thick is viscosity. So the liquid filling the posterior chamber is the vitreous humor. And this jelly pushes the retina against the eyes. So for some people, they might get their retina detached from their eye. You can go blind. Okay, so that's right under the corcoid. So they're injecting it in between layers. So they're not putting it into the jelly of the eyes or into the aqueous humor, those chambers. They're still injecting it to the outside.
Isn't that dangerous to put a punch in your eyeballs?
Oh yeah, yeah. They do it in prison, so it's all contaminated. You get an infection. If they go too deep, they might poke a hole. Now you got the vitreous humor leaking out or the aqueous humor leaking out. So yeah, it can be dangerous. So the bones that makes your orbital protects the eye. So if you're hit, right, with something, an object, your eyeball doesn't get hit. Right? And then the eyebrows protect from sweat rolling into the eyes. Eyelids, Belfer is the medical root word for the eyelids. The mucus layer of the eyes, the conjunctivas, they cover the front of the eyes and it covers the back of the eyelids. And it produces mucus to trap any debris or bacteria and flushes it out. So when you get pink eye, that is an infection of this mucous membrane. Lacrimal apparatus. So that's your tear system. So you have a tear duct that produces a liquid to moisten the eyes, and there's also enzymes to destroy any bacteria that might get in the eyes. So anytime you cry, liquid floods the eyes, and then it needs to drain. So some of it drains out of the eye, Some of else drains into the nasal cavity. So that's why your nose starts to run when you cry. So when you use drugs for the eyes, you got to be careful. You don't want the patient to have it go down their nasal cavity, back of their throat, and then the patient swallow the med. Muscle of the eyes, you got 6 pairs of muscles that allow for the eyes to move up, down, left, right, in and out. So here you got a little sling for the muscle called the trochlear. So just like any lens, the image that goes through it gets flipped upside down. So why don't we see everything upside down? So actually everything is upside down and backwards, but our brain, once you're an infant and you start to learn, it interprets it and flips it right side up. So on the retina, right, you get the image, the reflection, and then it sends an electrical signal through that blind spot in the back of your eye, and that goes to the back of the brain. So vision is interpreted in the occipital lobe. That's in the back of the brain. So here they're saying that it crosses. So some of the things that you detect on your left eye will be processed in your right hemisphere. And some of the things you see in your right eye gets processed by the left hemisphere. Aging. So less tears, so you'll get dry eyes, more eye drops for the elderly. Lens become more rigid, so that flexible protein becomes hard, so you have decreased accommodation. Retinal changes. So for the elderly, they are sensitive to bright light. So in geriatric office, the light's going to be a little dimmer. Loss of night vision. So what's being affected? Cones or rods? Cones detect color, lightning, rods, right? So rods would be affected here. Stigmatism. So the cornea is oddly shaped. Normally it's round, but it could be weirdly shaped. And then any light that goes through it will reflect it differently. Let's see. Retinal detachment. So the projector screen can be ripped away from the back of the eye. When that happens, what they'll do is they'll need to push it up against the eye, the back of the eye. If they don't, then those nerves can die off. So they'll need to inject oil into the eyes to keep the retina pressed up against the back of the eye, or you'll lose your vision. So there's a lot of athletes who had this happen to them. So if you look in their eye through certain camera angles, you'll see the light reflecting back at them with that oil. The ears, so hearing. So the abbreviation for ears are A. So the right ear, the left ear, and both ears. So the arcle or the pinna is the outer ear. And what divides the outer ear from the middle ear is the tympanic membrane. So you have 2 canals. This one is the external ear canal. So from the outside leading to the eardrum, the tympanic membrane, that's the external ear. From the tympanic membrane to the oval window, that's the middle ear. and then from the oval window inside, that's going to be the inner ear. So that's the division. Tympanic membrane, outer to middle, oval window, middle to inner ear. To transfer the vibration from the eardrum to the oval window, you have three bones. So the smallest bones in your body are the malleus, incus, and stapes. So as the eardrum detects sound, it vibrates, the bones vibrate, and then the oval window will also vibrate. So we are turning energy into electricity, whereas with smell, that's chemoreceptors, taste is chemoreceptors, vision, that's light receptors, so that's photoreceptors. But for the ear, it's not detecting light, it's not detecting chemicals, so it's detecting vibration and movement. So it's called a mechanical receptor. So it's detecting mechanical movement. So the bones vibrate and it bangs on the oval window. So the oval window marks the beginning of the inner ear. So we have an external tube, we also have an internal tube. So the internal auditory canal or internal canal is the eustachian tube. So that's why you have different terms. You have tubes on the outside, and they have the eustachian tube, and this drains into the nose and ears. So for children, they tend to get a lot of middle ear infection, otitis media, because if they have an infection in their nose, it'll back up into their ears, and then they'll get the ear infection. And then when the doctor says they'll grow out of it, they will physically grow out of it as their face elongates. It's harder to get an ear infection. Have you guys flown recently or driven up a mountain, down a mountain, and your ears kind of get plugged? Right? Yeah, airplane. So then your ears pop. So that noise you hear is that pressure being relieved down into your nasal cavity. Right? So the best way for children, if you're traveling or flying with children, is to have them suck on their pacifier or have them chew gum. So this action opens up the eustachian tube and helps relieve that pressure, so you don't get that crazy yelling 2-year-old in the aisles. The oval window. So that is the division between the middle ear and the inner ear. So do not get this mistaken with the round window, all right? So there's an oval window and a round window. We're not talking about the round window. That's totally different. So here it is in the structure. So the outer ear, the auricle, aka the pinna, the external ear canal, as opposed to the eustachian tube. So here's the eardrum. It is the dividing point between the outer ear, external ear, and the middle ear. You have the three bones, 1, 2, 3. It bangs on the oval window, which marks the beginning of the inner ear. Here is where it drains to the nose, the eustachian tube. So the ears have two functions with our senses. One is sound, so that's done in the cochlea. So when the oscillons bang on the oval window, it sends a pressure wave down the cochlea in its shell shape. Right? So it's changing that mechanical energy, that energy of movement, into a vibration energy. And inside the cochlea, you have these little hairs. And when they vibrate, they send a signal to the brain. And your brain will interpret that as sound. Right? So it's all the vibration of the fluid in your cochlea. The second function of the inner ear is for balance, your equilibrium. And that is done with your semicircular canals. So you have them all in three-dimensional planes. And similar to the cochlea, they're also lined with fluid and they have little hairs. So depending on which hairs are activated, you will know which position your head is in, whether you're upright, laying down on your side, or upside down. So that electrical signal is also sent to your brain for interpretation. So the labyrinth, that's all those weird chambers filled with fluid. You have endolith, perilith. Don't worry too much about the names. And then the semicircular canals, those are the ones in 3D space for equilibrium. The organ of Corti, that's the main structure of hearing. That is the division between the endolith and the perilith. So here in the cochlea, that organ of Corti will run down the entire length of the cochlea, and it'll divide the fluid on one side and the other. So here we have the oval window, and as mentioned, this is the round window. So this is the marking of the middle ear, not the round window. You guys ever played that game where you spun your head around the bat and then you try to hit the ball off the tee and then you try to run? So why is it that when you spin, or even on your office chair, and then when you stop, why does it feel like you're still moving? Yeah, you're balanced. Something's off. So your brain thinks you're moving, but are you moving? But what is moving? The liquid in your inner ear is still moving, right? So when you're spinning, you stop, but the liquid in your inner ear is still sloshing about. So that sends a signal to your brain, and it looks like you're seeing double or triple. So if you have a nausea and you're on a boat, so what you're seeing and what you're feeling are different. Your brain and the liquid in your brain is moving up and down, so it's detecting that motion, but what you're seeing is different. So to prevent nausea, you want to focus on something that's not moving. So look on something in the distance if you're on a boat to prevent the motion sickness. So it's the fluids. So they're still activating the receptors, and that signal sending to your brain, making you think you're still moving. So when you have that inner ear infection or that middle ear infection, it can cause nausea and vomiting. So the sound waves are collected just like a satellite dish into the ear, channeled down the tube. Just like a drum, the tympanic membrane vibrates, and then the three bones transfer that to the oval window. And then that movement is transferred to the liquid, and in the cochlea you have little hairs lining throughout that sends that electrical signal to the brain. Bone conduction. So earplugs versus muffs. So you guys know the difference? You guys know what earplugs are? Those are the little squishy things you squeeze, you shove them down your ear, and then they expand. So they're going to block a lot of the sound waves that's going through the air. But ear muffs, they cover your whole ear and the bone around your ear, and actually sound can be conducted through bone. So actually through bones, sound travels quicker. Same with water. Sound travels quicker through water, so it's more force. So if you just use earplugs, you're not totally protected from damage. So the best is a combination of both. Use the earplugs and then put the earmuffs over. Older adults, wax become drier and they produce less. Middle ear shrinks. If your bone gets hardened, if they get ossified, then they can't really vibrate to transfer the sound to the oval window, so you'll lose hearing. And it's going to be the low frequency sounds that they lose first. Just like visions, children will also need to learn how to hear. A lot of times, if a kid is not talking, that's not because they have a speech problem, it's because they have a hearing problem. So they can't mimic, they can't copy, they don't know when to be scared, when not to be scared. All right, when did your kid first learn the word mama, baba, dada, lala, nana? Those are cooing and babbling sounds. Those are not words. The kids have no idea what the heck they're saying, but a lot of adults, a lot of parents will debate. No, my kid's smarter. They learn mama at 4 months. They learn papa. They learn nana at 3 months. But that's not them talking. That's just them babbling and cooing, so making sounds. So once they get a little bit older, that's when they'll start to actually know what mom means, what dad means. Tumor somewhere in the ear. You can have so much wax dried up. So do not put your Q-tip down your ear canal. It's only meant to clean the outside. So we have solutions to break down wax. Hearing loss, it's those little hairs that vibrate. They become damaged. And of course, they're the ones that send the signal to the brain. So for some of them, they can be turned off, while other ones, when they're damaged, they're constantly sending a signal to your brain, causing sound, a ringing sound that you hear all the time. Infection of the outer ear, middle ear, or inner ear. So middle and inner ear can be dangerous. You can lose hearing. Hardening of the osticles, osteosclerosis. Hearing loss due to aging, proboscis. Alright, so that's the last lecture for this module, special senses. So for today it is online initiative module 55. And if you want to get ahead, go ahead and finish up 56. It's not scheduled until tomorrow. So 55 will finish up the nervous system, and 56 will be the senses.